It's a great pleasure today to be in the presence of Professor Kiran Seth, a person who has put his entire life energy in the service of Indian classical music and culture. Way back in 1977, he started SPICMACAY, the Society for Promotion of Indian Classical Music and Culture amongst Youth. What is it that made him start this organization, and what is it that he wanted to do this ages ago? Let's find out from him the story of the genesis of SPICMACAY. Professor Kiran Seth, I'm sure the youngsters, the younger generation would love to know directly from the horse's mouth, how has it been getting onto this journey of discovering and unfolding the joy and beauty of Indian classical music and culture?
I was a student at IIT Kharagpur, and I remember my lovely professors there who taught me so much in physics, chemistry, maths, etc., etc. But one person whom I remember a lot, who never taught me directly, but who planted a seed into me which is still growing into a massive tree. What he used to do is to organize a whole night of Indian classical music every year. It was called the Green Amateurs Night, and we used to go there, sit at the back, put our bedding. We were not interested in fact in IIT I used to sing Western popular music. I can still sing the Beatles. So what we used to do is to sit at the back and see who has come and who has not come, but we're definitely not interested in the that was going on. But without us knowing it, he had planted, as I said, a seed. And when I graduated and went abroad to do my PhD, there I saw a small advertisement that said that Nasir Aminuddin Dagar and Ustad Fariduddin Dagar were going to give a Dhrupad recital at the Brooklyn Academy of Music in New York. So हमने कहा चलो चलो देखें, let's go and see. He went to actually see it, not hear it, but it's something like the black box. You know what's coming in and you know what's going out, but you don't know what's happening in the black box. So we walked into the hall, and we walked out of the hall walking 1 inch above the ground figuratively. I didn't know why it happened, but I said, if it can happen to me, it can happen to you, it can happen to anyone. So there and then any artist, great artist who would be passing through New York, we would request them to give us an experience at Columbia University, where I was doing my PhD. Like that, great masters like Ustad Ali Akbar Khan Sahab came and, I won't call it performed, but did give us an experience. So I kept with this till I finished my PhD, after which I joined Bell Labs. Bell Labs was one of the topmost research labs in the world at that time, and I still kept in touch with this whole endeavor, let me say. I even started learning a little bit of classical music. Then I got an invitation to join IIT Delhi, and I came back for two major reasons. One, of course, that I was being invited by IIT Delhi, and the second was I wanted to learn classical music, Dhrupad, by Ustad Aminuddin Dagar Sahab. So when I came back, I tried to contact him, and he invited me to come to Kolkata. So, this was what brought me back to IIT Delhi, and I still remember that in IIT, when I was teaching the students there in 1976, yes, I asked the class if anybody had heard the name of, not the music of, Pandit Nikhil Banerjee, one of the greatest sitar players who was alive at that time. There was not one student in the class who had heard his name. They had cassettes of Joan Baez, Stevie Wonder, the Beatles, etc., etc. So, I said, should we do something about it? So, I said, sure. So, we got together and did a class project. We booked the convocation hall of IIT Delhi, huge capacity, about 1200 or 1500, I don't know, remember what. And we publicized it a lot under the name of Me4 Presents, Mechanical Engineering Final Year Operation Research Group Presents. And come the day of the program, we said, full to hall hoga nahi, not the whole hall, but we should get a very good audience, at least half the hall. But when I looked inside, 10 minutes before the program, there might have been 5 people. When the program started, there may have been 10 people. 10 minutes after the program was going, by the time the first rag got over, we were back to 5. Said, never say die, next year we again did it. This time it was Me5 Presents, Mechanical Engineering Final Years Present. And this, having learned from the mistakes of the first time, was a marginal success. After which this movement spread organically. Some people heard about it in other colleges in Delhi. They said we should start it there, so we started there. Some schools heard about it, they said we should start it there, we started there. Some of my students went to Ahmedabad, Bangalore, Kolkata, they said we started there, so we started there. One of the students who was in Maulana Azad College of Technology in Bhopal, which is now NIT Bhopal, Sunil Malhotra, he went abroad to do his PhD, not PhD, to do his MBA in Hartford, and he said, let's start it there. So, we started there, and we took Pandit Jasraj agreed to perform there. So, this is the movement has spread very organically and spread to about 500 towns in India, about 50 abroad, doing about 5,000 events a year.
Really beautifully expressed, what you just said, and but I'm sure that many of us are going to wonder and think that how can art or culture enhance us? I mean, in what ways? But can you tell us more about how is it that art actually enhances oneself or one's life or the quality of life?
Yeah, first let me just explain what the great mystic, Sufi mystic Hazrat Inayat Khan Sahab has said about 4 stages in the development of art. He says how does art develop? First you have the imitative phase, so you imitate. The next phase is the suggestive phase. The third phase is the creative phase. But he says there is a 4th stage after that. And what is this 4th stage? It is when art no longer remains only art, but becomes a direct expression of the soul. Now, what happens is, if an artist has reached stage number 4, he or she, while expressing the deep thing from his or her soul, can take you also there. That journey of taking you very, very, very high internally, elevating you internally, can be done beautifully through art, beautifully through art. What does it do? In the 4 stages, before that, when it reaches that, already creativity has come in. So, that creative element is also coming into you. So, like if you are doing maths or if you are doing physics, you will find because of that creative element coming into the form that you are listening, you are imbibing it also, and you can bring in that creativity in whichever subject you are in. If the person has reached phase number 4, then you can also start expressing yourself through what you are doing. From your soul can be expressed through that. Now, if the artist only reached phase 1 or 2, then at least you know there is an art form like that. That much you know. You will get the idea that look, there is something called Bharatnatyam, that is it, but not very much more than that. Therefore, if you notice what we have always tried to do, we have tried to take people, to bring people in stages 3 and 4 face to face like that, like you and me are sitting, so that you can imbibe what that person is going through into your own lives. And not just for that moment, mind you, not just for that moment, it stays with you. That is what the greatness, if the artist is really, really up there, he or she will affect you for long periods of time. And if you can also start learning nothing like it, then you can also start going into those domains which I call the alpha domain. So, that is how it enhances you, not just your personality, not just the fact that you grow internally, but also very practically you will do very well in the subject in which you are in. Because all these things, what they do is, at one level they are also improving your concentration, making it like a laser beam. You see a classical musician, he or she will never move like this and then like that and then like that and then like that. No, you see, if you ever see any of these great musicians, they will be sitting in one posture for hours on end. And what do you require? If you want to do well in any subject, the first thing you must require is that you should be able to sit still. If you can sit still, you will find that you will be able to again concentrate. Whenever you are moving, your concentration moves towards the movement. So, you must, what this tete-a-tete with the arts does, it will teach you also how to be still like that, focused. You can do whatever you are doing beautifully.
You know, this quality of stillness, and also I think what you are pointing towards is that there are many layers that through an experience of art and culture, a lot of refinement, a lot of maybe I do not know if it is sublimation or a transcending or a transforming quality, but a lot can be awakened within oneself through the medium of art and culture.
Yes, actually it can be awakened, it can be awakened through anything if you go into it in depth, because the only thing is that this is also a way of going into something in depth, but it can be done through maths too. I love mathematics, it can be done through that. One enhances the other, that is the beauty of it. Now, what happens is, see, you have done a Doctor of Philosophy, and in brackets it may be written Media Studies. I have also done a Doctor of Philosophy, it is written in brackets Operations Research, but we have both done a Doctor of Philosophy. Therefore, we both are touching one common chord, which is very, very deep. Of course, it is not happening these days, you know. Unfortunately, the Doctor of Philosophy has become Doctor of whatever subject you are doing. Even that is not there many a time, but the person who thought of it must have been fantastic. Imagine saying that Radhika and me are touching a similar chord. I can understand what she is doing and she can understand, I am not saying in detail, but she can understand mota moti, she can understand in broad the philosophy of what is being done. So, what I am trying to point out is that all these things enhance and especially our classical arts. Why is it? Because our ancestors experimented. What is it that can take you to this very, very creative and very, very inspiring and very subtle and very mystical domain? They tried many things and were able to come up. This is not something which comes up just like that. Many centuries have gone into the experimentation of what is it that can enhance me, what is it that can make me like that. That sort of a thing has been experimented with, and that is what is presented to us by what we call culture. And that is why it is important for us to come to know. Why to rediscover the wheel? The wheel has been discovered. It will be foolish for us to say, look, forget the wheel, let me rediscover the wheel. Or I will give you another example, like when I went to study in IIT, I remember being taken to a huge room and I was told, what is this? A computer. Now that is today in that small, the power of that can be brought out in this time at a atomic molecular level. It will be foolish to say throw all that out and go back to diodes and triodes. The similar thing here, what they have experimented with and come up with is to take you, show you ways of going the top of the inner Mount Everest. And if you do it this way, all the facets which I have told you, the creative part, the etc., you experience. And then when you are sitting on top of Mount Everest, just think of it. If you are sitting on Mount Everest, how you would feel? Well, that multiplied many times is what you can get from these domains.
Great. So you have, for you, your life has, what we know of is that it has sort of been a sadhana, a conscious choice and a will and an application of that will in sharing this joy and beauty with many countless others, and especially with the younger generation. I believe you have also worked with play school children. So can you tell us about how you have shared and I mean why you have shared? That's very clear, that because this can really open up something very beautiful within us. And like you say, it can also be math, it could be physics, it can also be culture, and that each one complements the other. But then you have concentrated on sharing this with the young. So can you tell us why? Why have you focused on the young?
See, there are two reasons. One is that I am a professor, I am teaching, I am seeing the students in front of me and I see that they are incomplete. And what do you do as a professor or a teacher? More than a professor and teacher, what I have tried to do, and I request all professors and teachers to do, is not limit their roles just to be a teacher or a professor, but to take the role of a guru. What does a guru do? A guru says, look, I want to mold this child or this young person sitting in front of me, not just into a very good mathematician or a good engineer or a good media person or whatever, but I would like to see that forms the ladder for him or her to become a fine human being, to become a person who's touched some domains which will make the person really high up inside. So that is the main aim. Now, one is I am teaching a subject, so I am teaching that part, but I said the subject is just a means, not the end. How do I bring that about? I have experienced something, what should I do? Shouldn't I share it with them? The first person whom I would share would be with the young person. That is the most important thing. Now you say, why did you share it with the elderly person, right? Sure, I would like to share it with them, but most of these things have a long gestation period, and if you share it with somebody who's got 1 foot in the grave, don't mind my saying it, chances are that he or she will never actually, he or she might get something out of it, but not the whole thing. The chances are very little compared to if I do it with a play school child, say class 1 of age 1, 2, 3. If I start at that level, then that little boy or girl, you just plant a seed. How long it takes for a seed which is planted to actually come out of the ground? Isn't there gestation time? You have to give that gestation time for these sort of things. And therefore, obviously, I'd start with my students and then even go to younger and younger and younger and younger people. That's the idea.
And in your experience, no matter what be the age of the person, what have you observed and seen that do very young children also relate to Indian classical music and culture? Do they respond to it?
Yes, yes. Whether they respond or not, if you see, I'm sure even, in all different parts of the country. I grew up in Bengal. My father was one of the first professors at IIT, in an IIT in fact. So, we grew up in Bengal, and there mothers would take their little children to these whole night programs or very tough programs, and if the child moves, they say, "Act jhaapad devo." So, it is not a question of they are responding or not. Whether they are responding or not, we will make them respond, dhada dhad. But what happened was, those very children would grow up to become very sensitive human beings, and they would be not necessarily in the arts, but in whatever they do, they would be doing it very nicely. I will give you an example so that you do not think I am just saying it just like that. I had gone to IIT Kanpur, and there was this boy who came up and was taking me back. So, I said, "How are you doing?" He said, "Sir, I am doing very well, I am one of the top students." So, I said, "Which coaching institute did you join?" He said, "Sir, I joined no coaching institute." So, I said, "Which attempt is it of yours?" He said, "My first attempt." So, I said, "Tell me the secret of your success." He said, "Sir, my school." So, I said, "Which school?" He talked of some small school in 24 Parganas. So, I said, "What was so special about your school?" He said, "Sir, every morning we had to do half an hour of yoga." So, I said, "That many schools do. What's so great about it?" He said, "No, sir, it was not like the one which you see on TV. 1 foot on top the other foot, you turn right, your nose pain will go. Turn the other way, your ear pain will go." I said, "No, it was also not like you send a PT instructor for a 6-month crash course in yoga, and then you ask him or her to come back and teach either yoga or PT, whichever one you like. No." He said it was concentrating more on the mind, and what it did was, my mind that was flying to the new mall, to the new Rajnikant film, running here, there, everywhere, would be brought within 3 sigma limits, like that. Then I said, "When what happened?" Then he said, "After school, it was compulsory for the whole school to do 1 hour of classical music." So, I said, "Then what did that do?" He said, "That brought like this, it became like a laser beam, my concentration." So, I said, "Then what happened?" He says, "When I took my books, my concentration, I did not have to, what I did in half an hour, people would take many hours to do. I did not require to go to any coaching institute, nothing." So, my dear friends, remember that what does the coach do? The coach is teaching you, you are sitting there and he is looking into your eyes, and aankhon se, from the eyes only, he is saying, "Look, your father and mother have given me 5 lakhs. So, your concentration by fear is like concentrating there. As soon as the class gets over, you go out of the class and your mind starts flying here and there. So yes, for that period you are concentrating by fear because of the 5 lakhs, but after that you can't use it, you can't use it to grow. Therefore, I always say that if you want to get into any of these top institutions, what you must try to do is take up one great form, not as a hobby, but as a serious endeavor, and do it every day. Like you brush your teeth, you don't forget to brush your teeth, right? Do it like that. That will be much more powerful than any coaching institute can give you. If you do that, you see how well you do in whichever entrance exam you want to get into.
So are you pointing to the importance of like a sort of a personal daily practice of like what in Indian words you would say abhyas, that you do it and you do it and you do it and you do it, and it slowly it settles in within ourselves, consolidates, and then we are one with it.
Correct.
And then that kind of becomes that energy that takes us forward.
Yeah, any form of this is just a meditation. Our classical music is Nada Yoga. So any form of meditation, what does it do? It first brings your concentration like a laser beam, and then after that, that's just the starting. After that, it takes you into domains which I cannot describe. That's what our ancestors have given us, and this is a beautiful form. Our classical music and dance are beautiful forms, even folk forms. I am not saying all these forms are very beautiful. The folk forms are very direct. You say straight, you ask for Allahu, or you say Rama, Krishna, or you whatever. But I am just saying any of the these folk forms are very direct, but the classical forms, they bring in these 2 additional elements, that are subtlety and abstraction, and therefore they are little tougher in some sense, but they all have the same goal, different roads to the same goal. So what they do is, as you rightly said, they are able to make you concentrated, bring you into that meditative stance, and then whatever I just said, creativity and the expression of the soul results, and you come up with lovely work, whatever you are doing, in whatever you are doing. That's the idea.
Great. So, like you said, SPICMACAY is a movement, it's not an organization, and a movement that has touched the lives of, I don't know, you would know, I mean you would be able to tell us how many lives you have touched through SPICMACAY. You couldn't count, maybe, you can't measure it, but you know the quality, the quality that and everybody knows. I mean, and the thing is, somebody who's experienced it knows, the others know of something.
Yeah.
But you don't really know it because you have not have a direct experience of it.
Correct.
So I'd like to ask you next, I'm sure this is a question many people may have, that how did you manage to put this together? Now you have an idea, you have a passion, you believe that art and culture have a value and a role to play in uplifting us, in making us be happier, in helping to live better lives and find our path, and our different paths are different rivulets that will all flow into the same ocean. Correct. Eventually. Yeah. But how did you do it? I mean, how did you build this movement? I mean, what did it take from you? What did it demand from you?
You see, when you fall in love, bhool jaat khan pan roop rang aan ban, you don't worry about the consequences, nothing. If you fall in love, and this love is slightly different from the one, it has got no, after effects, negative after effects. Other loves can have that, but this one is like, and if you do that, then you find that it just flows. You don't have to think too much. You don't have to say, look, I am going to do this next, or I am going to do that. I have never we never thought it's going to be like this, that we are going to be able to do 5,000 events in so many, about 500 towns in India, 50 abroad, you know, and still it's growing. So it's just something like, you know, you have experienced something so beautiful and you say, Radhika, you must experience this. You come here, I just want you to just try it out. So like that, Radhika says, okay, let me, and when she gets touched by it, she catches hold of 2 other people and says, look, you must try it out. And so this thing spreads like that from flame to flame. And if people, it does it very slowly, but it does it because you are touched so deeply that then you, as I just mentioned, bhula jata khana pana rupa ranga anaman. That's what.
Beautiful. So you're talking of a love that most humans will not talk about. You know, we would talk maybe on the romantic level or a level of a vital kind of a association, attachment. But what you're talking about is something that which is really dear to you, and so dear to you that you're eating it, you're drinking it, you're walking it, you're breathing it.
True.
I mean, it's so organic that it's a part of you, and therefore it's always there.
That's always there.
And that's how something like that experience that you recounted, where your first event had only 5 people, which went up to 10 and very soon came down to 5, didn't discourage you and didn't dissuade you.
Absolutely.
Because you believed in it and you wanted to continue no matter what.
It's not just belief. Belief is one thing, but falling in love is something else. I'm really telling you. That's, you can believe in something, you might believe a lot in something, but when you fall in love, which is not unconditional, in the sense not, you know, the type I'm just talking about, then you are left, you just flow with it, that's it. So it doesn't matter whether 5 people, 10 people. You see Ali Akbar Khan Sahab, when he used to play, he was playing like this. He's on his trip. He's not looking at how many people are there in the audience. He's not saying, look, he's on his trip, you want to come, always tralalu, bye bye, no problem, like that. So it's, but the passion is what drives the person, and when you see it, when somebody sees it, then he or she is also attracted to it. What is this thing that is making that person go like that? So when the person comes, then he or she experiences that, it goes like that. It's like a cascade sort of effect that has.
So this cascade sort of effect that you are talking about, it has happened in the form and shape of volunteers. Like you said that one was invited or was gently urged to come and experience. It's just an experience, just like a taste it, and
Correct.
then if she or he found the connection, and then obviously was eager to share the joy with others in her or his circle of influence or whatever, and like that it spread. So then SPICMACAY has a strong force of volunteers. So tell us about it. I mean, what is it to volunteer for SPICMACAY? Who can volunteer for SPICMACAY? And how has this movement grown from strength to strength with the volunteers that have joined along the way as you have walked?
First of all, it's not gently bringing in people. Sometimes 9th class, 11th class, 8th class, everybody in the auditorium. So whether they like it or not, they are there. Don't think, this thing of mollycoddling, oh please come, listen, I don't believe in it. I say, look, like as I was just saying, act jhampad debo. You sit there at one age, of course now we can't do that, but there's nothing wrong in the mother or father telling the child, you sit down, or the teacher saying, you sit down and you listen to it. And there is some force, there's nothing wrong with it. So that's one aspect. And then what happens, then the student, that the young person begins to realize, and what happened, the young person always knows, however small the child might be, this I have personally experienced, that if you are telling them something by force, they at once know when it's out of anger or when it's out of love. There's some intuition. So that part, never feel scared if you love the child to be like that. Regarding volunteers, yes, even it's a very tough thing to get volunteers these days even. because everybody is so busy. Busy doing what? I sometimes ask. Really, I am saying, you know, so much time, effort, energy we are spending on things which are so small in value. I won't say completely zero in value. We must think of what, you know, if I do this, then all these things will be byproducts. That sort of a thinking process has to come in. And also one more thing, this concept of Nishkam Seva. You know, there is a law of Nishkam Seva. It's something like the Newton's third law of motion. To every action, the Newton's law of third law of motion says, to every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. But this law of Nishkam Seva says, and I can say I have proved it in for my life at least, for every action there is a reaction that far exceeds the action, but does not come from where the action is placed. You place it here, it multiplies, 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 and then comes back to you. However, there is one way it gets stopped. If you expect it, khadak se, stop. So, the idea being that if you really give of yourself without expecting, not calculating, nowadays everything is calculated, even when you give you calculate, what will I get, what will I get. But if you can somehow take that part out, and that can be done if you are good at meditation, you can break that out. You do it and you will find that what you will get in return will be phenomenal. So, this part having been broken or having been forgotten, volunteers say, hame kya milega? What will I get? And when they find they are getting nothing out of it, neither money nor anything, you know, they drift away. So, getting volunteers for anything, true volunteers is very, 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 very tough. But still we have been able to get volunteers, very lovely volunteers, but the numbers have to be much more if we want to touch every child in the country or in the world. Why in the country? Mobile phones were developed in the West, we are using them. We can, with our heritage, also touch people all over the world. We can do it, but we have to get many more volunteers. For that, and we did consciously with volunteers. We could have also made a big setup. We got offers from Ford Foundation, from the government, to make a huge setup like an NGO, like NGOs are nowadays. But we chose not to do that, because we wanted to bring this element back in to the lives of young people. Also, this concept of volunteerism, where a young person learns how to give without expecting and can experience that joy which I have just described. But it takes time, it takes effort. Let us see what happens.
But what you said right now was, I think there is a lot of truth and weight to it, that when you really give out of joy, and because for the joy of giving, and not expecting that giving will in some measure come back to you. And the good thing is, and I mean the wonderful miracle is that it will come back to you.
You are right.
And like you rightly said, not from, if you've given to A, it will not come back to you from A.
Correct.
It will come back to you maybe through X or Y or Z, and at a point of time which is not defined.
Expected.
Which is not defined, which is not anticipated.
Correct.
But if it's given purely, without the taint of the desire of what good will come to me with my giving, then because it's pure, what you get back is multifold.
Correct.
And I think what Professor Kiran Seth is telling us today, it's subtle. It's not something very tangible. It's not something that the word can tell us exactly what the experience would be and what it really is. But again, one has to be open to that experience. One has to be open to that. Let me just test this guy out, what all these ideas, mumbo jumbo he's throwing at me. Let me try these out and do them, and my own experiments with my own life, and see if they work for me.
Correct.
So if we try, we will also find our own answers directly. I mean, these are just suggestions coming your way, and I think they're good suggestions, and they merit some attention. I think we need to give attention to these ideas that are coming through his way, and not just discount them as like, they don't sound just very practical, they don't sound pragmatic, they're not going to get us anywhere. There's no plan to this, there's no rationality, no belief to it. Because what Professor Seth is saying is something very deep, very subtle, and subtle things you cannot see, they're not gross. So they're not things that we can very tangibly see and feel. But yes, going through it we can. And that brings me to the next question that I really want to ask him is that, it depends if somebody wants to volunteer or doesn't want to volunteer. That's his or her own, self volition and choice. But it has to be an expression of her or his connection and commitment to that object to which he or she, wants to volunteer for. But in spite of not having a large number of people, or not a large number of people who have stuck on for a long time.
Correct.
More than 40 years, a lot of people would vouch that SPICMACAY has been a very important part of their life, and a very beautiful part of their life. So, so my question here is that when you're using this word that that to be in the meditative state, and it's beautiful, and to volunteer, it's beautiful, but we want more people to feel that beauty, not because SPICMACAY needs them, but SPICMACAY has, as a community and as a group of people who are working towards exploring something, have discovered the joy and wish to share it with others. All right. So my question here is that how do you plan, or what do you envision that in the new age, where technology is so pervasive in our lives, social media is there, everybody is saying that the attention spans of people are much shorter, and everybody wants instant results, and people want things quick on the go, and the forms of art and cultural experience we have seen may need more of our time, may need more of our engagement. So how is there a paradox? Do you think that the generation that's of the future will have those attention spans, will be away from social media and technology to actually let go and immerse in an actual concert or an actual engagement with a master?
See, it's a tough thing to answer, because media is very strong and it is an uphill battle. But as Mahatma Gandhi said, in the long run the truth always prevails. And I think this also will go through trial by fire, yes, but it will prevail, because it's got inherently truth behind it. That's why I think so. Tough battle, but yes.
Is there something that you want to say to the person who is probably in doubt that what we're talking about just makes a little bit of sense but not too much? Is there something, a bait that you can throw at anybody that come and experience this? Is this something that you think can help somebody to understand why this is so important, really?
See, I always say that the young person today is much brighter, sharper than we were when we were their age or your age. And maybe because of Darwin's theory of evolution, maybe because of opening up of the skies, whatever. But two things are lacking. One is a certain degree of patience and a certain degree of faith. If those two you can incorporate into your lives as an experiment, if nothing else, you will be able to touch domains like this, what we are talking about. And my only advice, or my little suggestion to the young person is, do develop these two things with whatever you are doing, because as an example of a small girl whom I met in a school, in a big classroom, in a big hall, I asked the children who were there, what's the difference between Bollywood music and classical music? And what she said was that when I hear Bollywood music, it's like a sparkler. It sparkles for 30 seconds and finishes. But when I hear classical music, it's like an incense stick, dhoop batti, put at the corner of the room. I don't get the smell, I don't get it right now. Little comes, and then it covers the whole room and stays for many hours. Today what's happening is, before we put the dhoop batti there or the incense stick there, but before the smell has come, we are out of the room. How can we experience that? So this is one thing which I would request young people to keep in mind.
So Professor Seth, Indian classical music and culture, like you have shared, has this wonderful, powerful quality to take us to another level, both higher and deeper, and which is finally beneficial for the person who would be involved with that. But what is your take on the role of cinema? Because usually when we look at films, and films are a part of popular culture, we look at them as sources of entertainment. But can films also deepen our consciousness further? I mean, do films have a role to play like other forms of culture?
Yeah, why not? And in fact, if you see films by Satyajit Ray, and if you see films by Ritwik Ghatak, they have used a lot of classical music. If you see the Apu's trilogy of Satyajit Ray, the music director was Pandit Ravi Shankar, and he has used it beautifully in Jalsha Ghar. He has brought three great masters, one of dance, Roshan Kumari, and Ustad Velayat Khan Sahab, whose music does the music for it, and I think Wahid Hussain Khan, I forget the vocalist, one vocalist, top vocalist. What I am trying to point out is that they have used a lot of classical music and also images of folk. If you see great masters, they have used a lot of images of folk and classical. Even in Kagemusha of Akira Kurosawa, you will find sequences of no, beautifully put in. But besides bringing classical music and dance, they can also bring in messages which are very powerful and direct. There is a direct meaning, they are subtle and but very lovely messages. So all these great masterpieces, they just don't entertain, they are not basically for entertainment, they are also for upliftment. It is another road which takes you right up there. If you see Ingmar Bergman's Seventh Seal, I am not just talking of Indian films, you find that there is the knight is playing chess with death, and what a beautiful sequences they are of how he is expressing his own confusion about what is the purpose of life. It is like a very philosophical question, and he is asking death to give him a little more time till he can find that out. He said, I am not ready to go yet. In Last Strada, there is this girl who I think her name is Gelomania, I forget what the name is exactly, but she feels that she is useless, she can't do anything. But there's this clown who's talking to her, and he picks up a pebble and he says, you know, I've learned that even this pebble has a purpose, and that gives her added impetus to continue on with life in some sense. Akira Kurosawa, the great Japanese director, in Kagemusha again, he brings in this beautiful statement, you know, of this warlord who says, the mountain never moves. And very nice philosophical statement. In his other film, Seven Samurai, there's a beautiful sequence, you know, which shows the power of meditation. There's this samurai who is helping guard this village, and there are these bandits who have come with muskets. So they don't know what to, they don't know exactly, they are little caught unaware. So they attack and then they go back into the forest, the bandits, preparing for the next day. This man, you know, he's sitting there with his sword like this, meditating, concentrating on it, meditating, goes down, goes into the forest. After some time you see him, they are all wondering what's happened. He's come back with one of the muskets. What I am trying to say is that without, totally unarmed. So showing what power meditation, what power concentration, all these things can do. So they are done in a more, little different way, but they are very powerful messages. That's the thing about a great film, a great director, that he or she can touch you again. It's the same process when they can touch your soul. That's it.
You know, now two things that have happened in the last year. One was the COVID pandemic, and which touched, I think, the whole globe and humanity. And the other thing which has happened in terms of education in India is the new education policy. I'd like to know, you know, what's your perception, what's your vision that because of COVID, what happened, you know, how you know, things have transformed, how we conduct ourselves, how events happen, and how we are looking at our future as humanity, and also in terms of the transformative changes in education that are possibly around the corner. What do you imagine how culture, music, cinema, how are they going to get a more integral place at the heart of education and at the heart of human connection, or will they still be, you know, somewhere on the fringe and only be enjoyed by a very few people?
Yeah, the first question about COVID, see, like something that we cannot see, obviously, right? It has brought the whole world to its knees. I want to mention here that over 90% of all matter and energy is dark. We see 7 to 8%. What are we talking about? What I am trying to say is most things are hidden, and that includes most great things. And that's where COVID gives you the time, has given us the time to think, to introspect, and to go inward. There is a positive aspect to it too. All the time we are running around imagining that this world is what's real, meaning in the sense this is all reality, but it's not all reality. And I think many people would have at least somewhat thought of this and have a chance to, as I said, introspect and maybe come up with answers about how they should live life a little differently, not necessarily, you know, eating and, you know, eating junk food, eating whatever they get, and, you know, living a very outward life, it has given, I think, at least people to think about that there is maybe some value of looking at things inward too. So that's the, I think, the positive side of this. Of course, things have changed naturally. I mean to say, many things are different, but we will overcome, I think. Regarding the new education policy, I think it's a very good thing. They have brought in a lot of aspects of heritage, culture, emphasize the fact that education is more holistic. That means an engineer, doctor or whatever, they should also be exposed to liberal arts, to our music, to our dance, things like that. So I think it's going to have a very good effect in the long run, because the more people who are exposed to it at a younger age, especially in the schools, it will have a much long-term positive effect, I feel. Yes.
There's another question that is just come to me this moment. I mean, I don't know how it came to me. Was that, do you think that we have these challenges, divisions and fragments in life and in the organization of society? Like there's the caste system, that we're divided by caste and class, and then we have these gender binaries. Like if you are, one sex, you have lesser power and privilege than the other, and there's inequity, there is disparity, there is injustice, there is poverty. Is there a way that these values and these qualities and these forms of life and living and cultural expression we are talking about, can they help, can they be a panacea, or can they help us to overcome these other challenges?
Sure, but such challenges, you see, I think that the way the universe has been designed, it can't be all good. I don't think so. It can't be all bad. But there are times when the bad becomes rises, then the good rises, then the bad rises. That's why we have these what we call yugs. This is Ghor Kali Yug. So there is a very negative thing, but what I am trying to point out is that too will pass. It has to, but it will never be one complete thing. It can't be. It has to be designed. How would you know something is good unless there is something bad or something negative? So I think there will always be this tug of war between the devas and the asuras. There will be, but there will be phases in which one will dominate over the other to some extent.
So, Professor Seth, you have been in Puducherry for nearly a month, and you have been here, you've experienced Puducherry. How do you think that Puducherry can participate and get engaged with this movement called SPICMACAY, and what can be done to promote greater engagement between the youth of Puducherry and SPICMACAY, especially with the uniqueness of Puducherry and all the various languages that I've spoken here, and it's a melting pot of people from all over the world staying here. What role can people of Puducherry, and especially the young students of Puducherry, play in SPICMACAY?
Yeah, at one level, see, we must try to expose them to the indigenous forms of music, dance, and that, but it should be of high quality. That's what I really insist on that, because we can take a very good, say for example, even classical Western violinist, we can take them to a school, we can take them to the college, no harm. So we could take the indigenous folk forms also, which are here, to schools and colleges. So that should be done, but the main thing is, if you really want to succeed, as I mentioned, all these are just ladders to reach a goal, and if the ladder is weak, it will drop, you will fall. The ladder must be very, very, very strong. So, whichever form you take, the form is not important to me. The person behind the form who is presenting is the real important person. And there must be people like that here in Puducherry. Take them to schools and colleges. So, the person will be able to identify with them very quickly. If, as I said, the ladder is strong, that is all. And then you also bring in things which are strong from other parts of the country and other parts of the world. Like, as an example, we started off with Indian culture, we started off with Indian classical music, then say, oh, there are other things that also affect. Bring in folk forms, films, bring in craft, bring in talks. They say, oh, but even foreign, there are many things abroad also that affect. No, kabuki, bunraku, western classical music, bring them in also. See, the point being, you do not know which one will touch whom. So, initially you start with something that is very, very close to you, and then slowly broaden the scope, and you never know whom you catch where, by what. Would that answer it?
Yes, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what you said about going from the near to the far, that you know, initially you may connect with something which is familiar or which you are comfortable with, but slowly to be opened up to newer ideas, newer forms.
And great masters, not only new ideas, great masters. The key, I think, lies, again, I really feel very strongly that we must expose the young people to the persons who have reached stage 4 of what Hazrat Inayat Khan Sahab said. Because once they reach, they are face to face with somebody who has reached phase 4 or even phase 3 maybe. But if they teach phase 4, they will never forget. It will be a fundamental change in their lives. And phase 4, I said, could be reached by folk forms, it could be reached by film, it could be reached by classical music, etc., etc., etc. Finished.
Any last words?
But as I said, I just say to the young person, please develop a little bit of patience and a little bit of faith. And you can be, do not think that you have to become a yogi to connect with yourself internally. You have to go to Mount Everest or sit on top of a mountain. You can be a yogi and still be the chairman of HLL.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I hope that this conversation that we have had with Professor Kiran Seth was as pleasurable, enjoyable and meaningful to each one of you as it has been to me. I shall cherish it forever, these moments of being with him and soaking in the presence of somebody who practices what he preaches. So, there isn't a gap between the word and the practice, and I also really hope that you would find your joy and be willing to take on this adventure of looking at some interesting cinema, some interesting forms of music, interesting forms of dance, even if it is only out of curiosity and like, you know, let's see what these guys are up to. Okay. Even if it's just that gets you started off, because who knows, you know, if you find that rapture of joy, and if you are if you find the connection, it could be a turning point.
If you fall in love.
Yes, 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 yes. How can we forget that? So, if you fall in love, then life is going to turn around and it's never ever going to be the same again. So, thank you, Professor Seth, and we hope we all find our spaces of falling in love with something, and that we can share the good joy and the cheer and the love with lots of other people. And we wish SPICMACAY more strength, and that the younger generation comes into SPICMACAY and understands this beautiful spirit of volunteerism that what is it to be a volunteer. You're not volunteering for anybody, you're doing it for yourself.
Correct.
When we are volunteering, we are really doing it for ourselves, and the joy that we experience, the reward is in the giving.
Correct.
And not in what you get. And like SPICMACAY, there are many other movements, many other beautiful things that you could find yourself connected with, but the important thing is learning to give and give joyfully.
Very true.
So wishing all of you a great journey in loving, in learning and giving. Thank you for being with us, and we hope that you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you so much. So yes, we'll continue our journey of exploring ourselves and these embodiments, as Professor Seth has told us, that through these great masters, what they embody and what they convey and express, that if we can touch and if that can transform our life, what a joy it would be. Wishing you lots of joy, and thank you, Professor Seth, once again from the depth of our heart. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.